So I played The Quiet Man and it made me want to drown myself in a toilet. I think this might very well be the dumbest, most idiotic thing I've ever seen in my life. Did a human being even make this? If somebody told me that this game was part of some alien plot to destroy the human brain or some shit like that, honestly, I'd kinda believe it. To be fair, if that was the case, the game would actually exceed at something. Everything about The Quiet Man is so ass backwards compared to the way basic logic and thinking work. Plot, characters, acting, writing, cinematography, gameplay, visuals, audio, fucking menus? It's all just wrong. Square Enix published this game, for some reason. It got a trailer at their E3 conference. Of every single video game ever made, The Quiet Man of all frickin' things gets a trailer at the biggest gaming event of the year. A major studio endorsed this game, yet it's about on par with your typical Steam shovelware, only with a budget, I think? I feel like if you had a cat, it just decided to walk across the keyboard, unintentionally pressing every single key randomly, all the while Unity and Microsoft Visual Studio were opened up, the end result would still be a video game more cohesive than this abomination. Then again, I feel like that might be how development for Fallout 76 went, so I could very well be wrong. Of course, after hearing just how big a train wreck The Quiet Man is, and how it's regarded as one of, if not the worst game of 2018, I, being the genius I am, just had to drop some cash and pick it up on the PlayStation Store. I mean, how could I pass up a game with core features like experiencing a soundless world, blurring the lines between live action and gameplay, and accelerating combat? Maybe because every one of the game's advertised key features are total bullshit? Reading the overview on the PlayStation Store, you can just tell how hard they had to stretch to make this game look appealing. It's embarrassing. State-of-the-art CG, facial animations delivering strong visual fidelity and emotional range, an arsenal of combat moves ranging from punch and kick combos to grappling and throwing enemies. This is the funniest joke I've ever seen in my life. The Quiet Man is one of those games that try so hard to seamlessly blend film together with gameplay. I'd say the horrendous gameplay is a match made in the sewer with the crappy cinematics, but the game doesn't even fuse them together that well. Since The Quiet Man is trying to be both a game and a movie, I'll be going over it as both and why it completely fails as both. It clearly wants to be a movie more than a game, so I'll cover that aspect first. The story. Kinda. The Quiet Man is about some guy named Dane who looks like Harry Osborn from The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
You're a fraud!
Quiet Man. He's walking down the street, and everybody that he passes by is probably a much more interesting character than the loser that we're stuck with for this game. Dane picks up some food from a street vendor, I guess. The vendor warns him about some gang, and Dane decides to pick a fight with some thugs in an alley. What follows is the audio completely cutting out.
What the hell, man? You stupid or very stupid? ¡Muévase!
And no, that's not a glitch or a bug or anything, that's supposed to happen. See, the main gimmick of The Quiet Man is that the protagonist is deaf, and the lack of sound is supposed to put the player into his perspective. It's actually an interesting concept. The only problem is that they fucked it up. The game doesn't do anything to draw you into Dane's perspective. In fact, it does quite the opposite and takes you out because it's impossible to understand shit. Dane is able to read lip movements and understand sign language, two things that your average player won't understand unless they're super good at deciphering both. It'd be fine if there were subtitles, I guess, but there are none, except for when the sound is on. Dane understands what's going on, but we as onlookers do not. So already the game fails miserably at putting the player in Dane's shoes. It's such a horribly implemented gimmick that it feels like they either shoehorned it in for the sake of whatever. Or they didn't even try to tell a story that you could still understand without hearing or understanding character dialogue. There are long stretches of cutscenes where two guys are talking to each other about something for 10 minutes, but you can't understand them because some asshole decided to press the mute button. You get no context, no understanding as to what they're even babbling about, no idea what relationships any two characters share with each other, no reason to give a shit about anything. All you get is some muffled harp sound. Imagine that for 10 minutes. Every footstep or punch has this muffled boom or poof sound that makes me want to blow my brains out after 2 seconds. There's an entire cutscene specifically dedicated to music on a piano that we can't even hear, where nothing happens. What's the point? About all that you can do is make vague assumptions about what's going on because the game sure as hell ain't gonna explain shit. You play as a white guy beating up minorities, totally not giving off uncomfortable implications. His mom was shot dead because two idiot kids got into a gunfight over a pair of shoes, and Dane as a kid walked up to them like a dumbass. One of them decided to freestyle rap on the spot.
I ain't gonna let it get to me, I'm just gonna creep. Down the pumpkin hill, I got to find my little speeds. I know that it's here, I can sense it in my feet. The great emerald's power allows me to feel.
Dane's infatuated with some lady because she looks like his mother. Gross. Some Birdman is doing something that involves kidnapping this girl. And apparently there's paranormal, supernatural stuff in this universe. Also, there's a black guy, a douchebag with a ponytail, and some old cop dude, I guess. On the store page, it says the game's story is silent and vague for the sake of leaving it up to the player to make their own interpretation. Fuck off. Plenty of games actually do that by crafting a story around this idea and are much more effective than this piece of shit. By that logic, you could twist anything as up to interpretation by removing the volume. I'm all for stories about protagonists with some kind of disability, physical or mental, but don't do it like this. If I have trouble telling what the fuck is going on in your game because of shit like this when all of my senses are fully functional, how the hell do you expect people who are actually deaf to know the story when there are no subtitles to read? Deaf people can still read. Lack of hearing doesn't impair a person's ability to read text. Nice job alienating the demographic that you half-assedly represented in this game. Thankfully, there is a version of this game with volume on, so let's rip into this train wreck properly with that. The story with audio this time. I'm gonna give this another go now that we've actually got a method of comprehending what the fuck even happened in this game. Well, not really, but we've at least got audio, so I'll work with that. There was a thing with The Quiet Man that about a week after the game's initial launch, they would release sort of a new game plus thing called The Quiet Man Answered. You play through the game again, unfortunately, this time with the volume actually on. Admittedly, I didn't actually play through this part because I have better things to do with my life than playing The Quiet Man for a second time, such as making a lengthy video ripping apart The Quiet Man, but I did want to be fair to the game, so I looked up the unmuted cutscenes on YouTube. Believe it or not, with sound, the story is actually worse than it is when muted. Imagine the most cliche, stock, unoriginal crime drama you possibly can. I can promise you that The Quiet Man's narrative is far, far worse than that. So deaf dude Dane does dirty deeds in some crime organization with a black guy named Tay, who was there when Dane's mom got shot dead by one of those douchey wannabe gangster rappers that you find on SoundCloud. Actually, he was the one that pulled the trigger, so why is Dane still hanging out with Tay when he was the one who killed his mom? Is he stupid? I probably just answered my own question. Also, he's working with the ponytail dude. I think he has a name, but I don't remember because he's such a non-presence throughout the game, and I don't care. They're at war with a gang led by grown-up sound clown that's apparently called Soul 33? Sounds more like a 12-year-old's Xbox Live gamer tag, but okay. There's a girl that Dane is given orders to protect who gets kidnapped by somebody dressed like a bird who I think is working with the rival gang. Dane tries fighting the guy to rescue the girl, but he loses when he grabs the Birdman stun baton on the end that frickin' zaps people. Not even just a light grab or a touch or anything, but a full-on grip. Like that scene in Home Alone when one of the wet bandits tightly grips on the red-hot doorknob. Our protagonist is a goddamn idiot. He later finds a box with the bird mask and the girl's dress with the bloodstain on it. There's some scene that implies he was Bird Boy the whole time and killed a bunch of people including the girl, even though he saw Bird Boy in the club who was clearly somebody else. And a scene following the hallucination shows the real Bird Boy with the girl, once again reaffirming that our protagonist is a goddamn idiot. At the same time throwing out the possibility of Dane maybe having multiple personality disorder, or at the very least something else to his character that isn't just, I really miss my mommy. I'm not exaggerating when I say that missing his mother and feeling guilty about her death is literally all there is to Dane's character. The driving force for everything that Dane does, and subsequently everything that goes on throughout the story, is Dane feeling bad about his mom getting killed. That's not inherently a bad thing, but holy shit, this game shoves it down your throat constantly. Every time the game gets the opportunity, and even the times when it shouldn't even have the opportunity, the Quiet Man keeps reminding you that Dane is sad that his mom died, flashing back to her death every 5 goddamn minutes, and making his only motivation to save the kidnapped girl being that she looks like his mother. But you see, Dane saving the singer, who's named Lala by the way, is supposed to be symbolic of Dane making up for his past failure of getting his mom shot by a couple dumb kids fighting over a pair of shoes. Symbolism automatically makes the narrative smart, right? Right? Totally not fucking stupid. The whole guilt over dead mom might not be that insufferable to witness, and maybe actually add something to Dane's character if this empty shell of a thing actually had a character. Dane is such an unlikable, unsympathetic, one-dimensional organism where somebody clearly forgot to insert a personality trait. There's a billion scenes of Dane flashing back to his mom, or hallucinating about his mom, or being sad about his mom because there's literally nothing else to draw from with him. The only other defining thing about Dane is that he's deaf, but even the game seems to forget about that all the time. One moment he'll be talking with the character like normal, as if he's not actually deaf. Sometimes he'll communicate with sign language, and sometimes Dane has his head turned away and some other dude on camera is talking about nothing while Dane can't hear. Who approved this? You have some old asshole talking to Dane about dumb shit for 2 hours, and they couldn't even have Dane look at him? At least have the old guy get Dane's attention, do that much. Freaking anything to sell the fact that Dane is actually deaf. The lack of detail surrounding this just reinforces the notion that Dane being deaf was something that they just half-heartedly tossed in. Not to mention the pacing is just awful. The entire story meanders around with nothing happening until the quote-unquote main villain bites the dust, and then it shifts to the crime organization that you're with being the villains because the game would be an hour long otherwise. Then you kill the ponytail douche whose name I don't know, Tay shoots you dead but you somehow come back to life as some supernatural being, despite there being literally nothing supernatural at any earlier point in this brain-dead tale about a brain-dead tool, probably because they just gave up at this point. You fight the old guy who's your dad by the way, you go to jail and then you get out, the end. God, this is so fucking boring. It's impossible to give a shit about anything. No person in this train wreck has any character to them. Everybody is the same from when the game starts to when the game ends with no growth, because there's nothing to work with for any of these empty husks. You will never be invested in any relationship or dynamic that two characters share because the plot completely fails to give you a reason to give a shit. Dane's father is an abusive asshole to him throughout his entire life. I don't care because they're both one-dimensional mannequins. Tay and Dane are supposed to be best bros. I don't care because there's so little time devoted to the two of them actually being friends. The romance, or whatever they were trying to do, falls flat on its face because of the creepy as fuck reason for Dane being attracted to Lala, and the two of them sharing the same amount of screen time that Venom got in Spider-Man 3. The latter, I feel, has the most wasted potential, considering they could have used on-screen time together with Dane and Lala to give both characters just the tiniest bit of anything, but Nah, 95% of the story just had to be spent fetishizing Dane's dead mom. To draw a comparison, in Yakuza 0, specifically Majima's story, the main catalyst of his story is about protecting a girl just like how it is with Dane. The main difference is that Yakuza makes it interesting. Both Majima and the girl Makoto actually have a relationship that develops. Makoto starts off as a target Majima has orders to kill, but shit goes wrong when the two of them end up on the run, with Majima protecting Makoto. It's through the time they share on screen that we get to know more about their dark pasts and who they are. You can feel a connection between both characters because they actually have screen time together to develop and make you feel something, especially when you see the ultimate conclusion to their relationship, none of which the Quiet Man ever has to offer. They get like one scene in a car together, the girl gets kidnapped, most of the game is a wild goose chase with Dane and the bird boy, you rescue her and then she immediately gets kidnapped again. Fucking riveting, I can just feel the bond they share. It feels like the only reason anything in this game happens is because the script said so, rather than any reason that might come off as the tiniest bit natural or believable. There's only one character in the game I actually like, and that's the vendor guy at the beginning. He only says 2 things and gets a few seconds of screen time. I like him, he seems chill. The tone of this whole thing has all the consistency of a JonTron upload schedule. Sometimes the game is grounded in reality, other times Dane is doing these cheesy, unrealistic moves that go completely against the serious mood the Quiet Man is aiming for, and then the aforementioned supernatural bullshit the game pulls out of its ass at the very end. Did they just improvise this whole thing with no thought as to how any of it would all fit together? Because that's what it feels like. Can't really blame them though, that's what the best movies do. Ain't that right, Revenge of the Fallen? It all culminates into a story that has no idea what it wants to be or what it wants to accomplish. As such, it fails at being about anything and fails to accomplish anything. It's the kind of story that you see from that one pretentious douchebag who thinks he's the most intelligent person on Earth, unaware of how badly they suck at writing. Who am I kidding? David Cage is better than this. The acting and dialogue. It's bad. It's so fucking bad. I have a strong suspicion the actual reason as to why they got rid of the sound was a vain attempt to mask just how abysmal the character dialogue and acting is. Everybody looks and sounds dead and miserable, as if they don't want to be there. I mean, I can't really blame them, but it's so boring watching all these people who clearly have no actual investment in anything going on. Any attempt to actually emote is about as forced as that one battle cry from Ride to Hell Retribution. Whenever a character is trying to be happy, it comes off as one of those photographs where the person is putting on a smile, yet you can tell deep down they're a tortured soul dwelling on every poor decision they've ever made that led to this point in their lives. The rival gang is supposed to be threatening, but their dialogue and acting are so juvenile that they're about as intimidating as a middle schooler who drops racial homophobic slurs, and scream about how much they fuck your mother every time they get killed on Call of Duty or Fortnite or whatever the kids are playing these days. You know, this is why birth control exists.
Yeah, I did it. So 33 for life. What the fuck you looking at, huh? Little bitch. That's what I did. So 33 for life, homie. This is what I represent. Homie, yeah. Homie, what the fuck you looking at, huh?
But you didn't even shoot her. You're getting arrested for the murder of somebody you didn't even shoot. Just tell the police you weren't the guy who killed the mom. They might not believe you, but it's worth attempting. Dane saw who had the gun, he can testify. Why are you taking the fall for a murder you didn't even commit, you dumbass? When someone tries to sound angry or in pain, they do such a bad, unconvincing job that it's the funniest shit on the planet when it was never even supposed to be funny in the first place. For God's sakes, Dane, you're smiling. The girl you're stalking is dead as far as you know right now, and you look like you had the mother of all orgasms. Jesus Christ, Dane, you couldn't even make it through day 1 of No Nut November? You're pathetic. I don't know whether to blame this on bad direction or material so bad that the actors just don't have anything to work with. The only one who seems to be trying, is Tay's actor. You can tell he's at least attempting to do something as opposed to everybody else doing nothing. But there's only so much he can do with dialogue this awful. That's more than I can say for anybody else though. I checked the IMDb page of The Quiet Man, and in terms of acting, it doesn't look like anybody here has done a whole lot worth note. they're mostly TV actors that have done maybe 1 or 2 films, most of which average out to about a 5 out of 10 on the site, with a couple things above a 7. Also, one of the kid actors appeared in the hit Nickelodeon sitcom Henry Danger. You can tell who's acted in something before, and also who's never had an acting gig before this game. Not by a whole lot, but still, it's embarrassing. Production values. Air quote. Because we don't have any sound for the first playthrough at least, that means that there's gotta be a lot more heavy lifting on the visual end to accommodate for this. When there's nothing to focus on in terms of sound, the player's attention is gonna naturally be more focused on the visual aspect. Now, does The Quiet Man at least deliver in that department? No! I'll start off giving credit that the game at least appears to have the camera quality that you'd see in movies and TV. It's a step above Super Seducer, which looks like one of those shitty vlog channels that film every second of their dull, boring, uneventful lives that only 5-year-olds enjoy, and Kimulator, which just looks like a bad quality YouTube video, and Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, where you can tell everybody was doing cocaine. That's about everything good I can say. The actual cinematography is so boring and uninteresting. It's the most flat, stale camera work you can imagine. Nothing interesting is ever done in terms of lighting, or color, or composition, or framing, or anything that actually makes cinematography more interesting than uncreatively showing something happening, or often not happening in the Quiet Man's case. Everything looks the fucking same. Whether Dane's outside, or at the gang's hideout, or the club, or wherever, every shot is the same dark, ugly, dimly lit thing, and it's just not pleasant or even engaging to look at. A huge reason why the game fails to make you invested or feel any kind of emotion throughout this slog is that the aesthetics never do anything to entice some kind of emotional response, aside from wanting to drop into a coma. Then again, the few times there is a change in color, the game somehow makes it even more ugly. When the girl gets kidnapped for the first time, the entire scene becomes this red and black clusterfuck because I guess they wanted to replicate the Virtual Boy for some reason. And the daytime flashback scenes are overwhelmingly bright and washed out and just look terrible. Compare this to games like Journey or Abzu, which do have audio, though none that directly tells you the story. All the storytelling is done strictly through visuals. There's a lot of care and attention to detail put into color choices, lighting, environmental design, and the way it's all framed. This ensures that the player can actually see some kind of narrative and give a shit about it. None of which you're ever gonna find in The Quiet Man. I wouldn't even be all that critical toward this aspect, at least not to this extent, if the game didn't force me to. It's literally the only thing you can focus on in the first playthrough. Nothing even happens on camera, it's just dumb people dicking around talking about dumb shit that your dumb ass ain't gonna care about because dumb game is dumb dumb dumb. Whenever someone punches somebody else, it looks so weak, yet apparently it's supposed to be strong enough to knock the other guy out. There's also a billion generic shots outside the city and inside the city that I'm guessing are supposed to be transitions. But the way they're implemented makes the game look like a sitcom. I feel like the editors probably mistook it as one because of how unintentionally funny the game is. Anytime the game has movements that require the human body to not be half asleep, the game cuts from bland yet competently made live-action footage to CG nightmare fuel. For some reason, half of the cinematics are done with in-game models, and it makes Mass Effect Andromeda look like Uncharted 4. Not only do the in-game models look like shit that you'd see from 2 console generations ago, but look at that animation, it's so stiff. Body movements are way too robotic when paired with the realistic build of all the characters, and almost nobody has any actual facial animations aside from lip movements and occasionally blinking. It's extreme uncanny valley and makes me wish my already terrible eyesight was even worse so I don't have to look at this shit. For God's sake, the abusive dad cop is always smiling. During the silent playthrough, you'd probably assume he's Dane's friend or partner or some guy who gives him a regular blowjob, rather than an abusive piece of shit because his face conveys sunshine and rainbows 24/7. Although the in-game models are used for more intricate and action-oriented moments, that's not what they're only used for. Sometimes they're used for scenes where the characters literally just sit around and babble about shit you don't care about. You know, the exact same thing that happens in live action. One scene just has Dane and the cop sitting in a car doing nothing except talking. Wouldn't it have made more sense to have both the actors actually sitting in a car with a real camera rolling, instead of wasting so much time and money on animation and rendering of the scene? Same with the scene where everybody's outside doing whatever. You seriously couldn't just get everybody together and record right there, you had to animate it? The game seems to pick and choose what parts are live action or CG at random, often switching between the two on the fly, and boy howdy it's jarring. This whole game looks like poop. The end. Except not really, because The Quiet Man screwed even more things up. That's it for The Quiet Man the movie. Here's The Quiet Man the game. Gameplay. Take the most bare-bones, simplistic, stock template for a beat-em-up, somehow find a way to strip it down even further, then just break the whole thing, and you'd get the combat system in The Quiet Man. The main mechanics are punching, kicking, grabbing, and dodging. I never thought you could fuck up a control scheme that's so simple, but they found a way. Basic movement feels clunky to the point where simple walking, let alone punching enemies, feels horribly off. It's the kind of feeling you get if you played with a faulty, barely functioning controller, except it's entirely the software's fault. There's no natural flow to any of the fighting, nor any way to properly lock onto an enemy, so pretty often the game will just lock on to whatever its finicky system will register. This might just be me being used to games like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, Transformers Devastation, Nier Automata, God of War, Kingdom Hearts, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Neo, every single 3D Zelda, Hyrule Warriors, Senran Kagura Estival Versus, don't ask, Sengoku Basara, Yakuza, Ratchet & Clank, Prince of Persia, and others I'm probably missing. Pardon me for being used to games that aren't dog shit, but those games either let you manually pick what enemy to focus on and kill, or had auto-lock-on reliable enough to where you didn't even need to manually lock on. You need one of the two to make 3D combat playable, let alone fun, and I figured we would have been past the point of screwing up a mechanic that crucial ever since Ocarina of Time on the N64, but clearly I trust people too much. Another thing all those games have that's sorely lacking in The Quiet Man, aside from a reason to exist, is combat with more depth than Babby's first Double Dragon wannabe. You can punch enemies, and kick enemies, and grab, then punch the enemies. That's it! No combos, no variation, barely more than a single type of enemy. The whole game becomes a button masher because you literally have no other method of fighting enemies aside from spamming punch. I'm not asking for a combo list that rivals Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, but, you know, try more. Or at all. This probably wouldn't even be that bad if the AI wasn't artificial intelligence without the intelligence. Enemies stand around doing nothing, barely attempting to even attack you, and often take forever to even notice you're there. Did somebody just steal the code for Ride to Hell's AI? Because if you have to borrow or steal from Ride to Hell, never make another game again. From the first combat sequence to the last, it's never engaging because somebody lobotomized the basic controls in AI. This is the same thing throughout the entire damn game! It's barely around 3 hours long, half of which are cutscenes probably, and even with a length that pathetic, the game still manages to drag and overstay its welcome. You're just punching the same 5 dudes over and over and over again throughout. On occasion, you'll fight some guy with a melee weapon that can block anything, which the game never tells you how to beat, or some boss that blocks everything, which the game also never tells you how to beat. By the way, the game sucks shit at communicating anything to the player. It doesn't tell you what any button does, what some of the more complex moves are that you can pull off. I only found out that dodging does some slow-mo witch time BS by looking it up online. Also, pressing L2 does whatever this is supposed to be. Apparently you can feed a guy gasoline. I don't know how though. I'm not asking for some 40-hour long tutorial that goes over what happens when you move the control stick forward. God, fuck no. But don't withhold information that's vital to playing your game. In-game feedback is also piss poor. You have no way of telling how much health you have, the amount of damage an attack does to you, how close you are to dying, or even if you can heal anything off. There's no health bar or UI of any kind, and the whole screen turning red thing is dumb. Enemies don't have health bars either, and it's damn near impossible to tell how much you hurt them or if they actually died. A lot of the time, there's these cinematic slow-mo punches that knock the enemies down. At first, I thought they were finishing blows like in every game ever that does them, but apparently not. The enemies often get back up, and I have no idea what circumstances trigger these slow-mo punches, or what you have to do to make them happen. Can't go without mentioning the countless times the game decides to overlay a cutscene or flashback over you fighting people, or the stupid lens flare light that always shows up in the corner for some reason. As if it wasn't hard enough to see when it looks like Vaseline was rubbed all over the camera lens. The only semi-enjoyment I had with this garbage was seeing how many times I could get Dane's fighting animations to just jump cut between one another. It makes for a good drinking game, which helps numb the pain. My favorite time this happens is the final combat sequence when the kick animation can repeat multiple times. Also, every time you die in the game, your mom makes a stupid face and I want to shoot her with a rocket launcher. The frame rate is ass-tastic, especially for a game that's this visually barren and levels that aren't big in the slightest. I'm guessing only a maximum of 5 enemies show up at once because this thing would have a nuclear meltdown and light the system on fire if one more showed up. There's times when you don't even fight enemies, just walking around for a couple seconds after one cutscene to immediately trigger another. This game was designed by a turkey and I am done talking about it. The Quiet Man is shit. Don't play it. The entire thing feels like it started off as a movie somebody tried to pitch to a studio, nobody wanted to pick it up because of how bad it is, and the creators didn't think to go to Columbia Pictures, who will put anything in theaters. Also, they wanted this thing to get more attention than it would have gotten as direct-to-video schlock rotting away at the bottom of the Walmart bargain bin. So they just spliced it together with spaghetti code and the most bare-bones and soulless game design you could do and still get away with calling it gameplay. Everything is bad. If you drew any aspect of filmmaking or game design out of a hat, you could write an essay on how the Quiet Man butchers it. It baffles me how many people worked on this game. Man of Action wrote the story, the developers of the original Prey designed the game, one of the Yakuza guys directed the action, and Square Enix published it. You'd think between one of these guys something would have been done competently, but I guess not. It's not even a fun kind of bad. The whole thing just makes you bored and miserable from the pure laziness, made all the more irritating by how patronizing it is. It's so diluted into thinking it's some kind of intelligent, profound art piece that it delivers all its themes as subtly as Kool-Aid Man. The motherhood symbolism is so hammered in that it just becomes insulting. Then again, I probably deserve to be insulted for dropping $15 on this garbage. It's the video game equivalent of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. So convinced that it's smart and deep despite how numerous and amateurish all its flaws are. It doesn't even get menu options right. Instead of text, it's just these no-context symbols that do a poor job conveying what they're supposed to represent. There's a video game within this video game that gets that right, but the Quiet Man couldn't be fucked to do so. The only positives I can give this game are really stretching. The live-action bits seem to be recorded with professional camera quality, the 3D models look like what they're supposed to resemble, and button inputs function. When you push a button, what's supposed to happen does indeed happen. That's a nice little detail. I'd probably take the Quiet Man over games like Ride to Hell or Mass Effect Andromeda, but I'd also rather bathe in sulfuric acid before playing those games again. The Quiet Man can rot. It's dumb and I hate it.